Hey everyone, welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about movies off of the 200 best horror movies of all time list from RottenTomatoes.com. My name is Clay McCormick, and with me as always is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I wish they brought some Windex for the movie we're doing tonight, because this mirror needed a clean job, I think. But
oh my god.
It's old. It's an antique. We are of course, if you couldn't tell, talking about 2014's Oculus, which is number 182 on our list, and has a 74% Rotten Tomatoes score. We no longer know the adjusted score because they removed it. Had you seen this one before?
Yes, I had. I think I saw it pretty close to when it came out. And I remember liking it more the first time. I had some qualms this time, shall we say. What about you?
I watched it for the first time, I think last year or possibly the year before that. When I was doing in October I was trying to do a horror movie a day or something like that. And I think this was one I just threw on because it's one of those movies that was perennially on Netflix, and so eventually I just said, what the hell, go for it. And I didn't at the time know who the writer-director was, which I have some thoughts about as to why this is on the list that involve him. But I remembered, I kind of had a similar feeling the first time as I did to this. The first time I kind of was like, I think I might have been working while I was watching it, so I wasn't really super engaged by the first half, but then there's a certain point where it all kind of like kicks into gear, and then from that point on I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah. This
time I found myself going, I thought this was better for the first half.
Me too.
And then when it gets to that point about halfway through, I go, oh, okay. All right. Yeah, this stuff is pretty good. This is when the good stuff starts.
Right. This is what I remember.
Right. So that's an interesting... It's interesting that I had that reaction both times, because I didn't really remember much of the beginning at all. But yeah. So we'll take a quick break, play the trailer, and then we will talk about Oculus.
Hello again. You must be hungry.
Tim is a healthy adult who represents no danger to himself or anyone else, and I believe he should be discharged.
Hey, little brother. I found it.
What do you mean?
We only have a few days.
A few days for what?
To keep our promise and kill it. My name is Kaylie Russell. The purpose of today's experiment is to prove that the object behind me is responsible for at least 45 deaths in the 4 centuries of its recorded existence.
We got a new home, so we get new furniture.
It's a bit ostentatious, though, don't you think?
Hey, Dad. Who's that lady in your office today?
What lady?
We were just kids. We made up a scary story so we wouldn't have to accept the fact that our father was a sick man who killed our...
Mom?
Why don't we just end it right now and smash the damn thing?
First, I intend to prove that the people I've just described were victims of the supernatural force that resides in that mirror.
You want to redeem the family name?
You promised me you'd never forget what really happened.
I was 10 years old.
Daddy?
Tim.
Snap out of it.
It's not real. Oh my God. I've met my demons. I have many. seen the devil. He hears me.
Okay, Oculus from 2014, number 182 on our list. Directed by Mike Flanagan, written by Mike Flanagan and Jeff Howard, based on a short screenplay by Mike Flanagan and Jeff Seidemann. Starring Karen Gillan, Brenton Thwaites, which sounds like a made-up name if I've ever seen one, Katie Sackhoff, Rory Cochrane, and a very sassy demon mirror. Amanda, what happens in Oculus?
Haunted by the violent demise of their parents 10 years earlier, adult siblings Kaylie and Tim are now struggling to rebuild their relationship. Kaylie suspects that their antique mirror, known as the Lasser glass, is behind the tragedy. The seemingly harmless reflections contain a malevolent, supernatural force that infects the mind of anyone who gazes into it. As Kaylie gets closer to the truth, the siblings become caught in the mirror's evil spell.
Mm-hmm.
So, Clay, some things you'll find in this movie include...
I have to know.
18th century Stanley Tucci lookalikes.
He's hard to miss. Got those circle glasses. Always a solid performance from Stanley Tucci, whether it's actually him or a 18th century lookalike.
18th, 19th, 20th, whatever century you want, Stanley Tucci's got it down.
A Tucci for every occasion.
Lengthy direct-to-camera exposition.
Mm-hmm.
Poor interior decorating choices.
Mm-hmm. Very.
The most dangerous apple since the Book of Genesis.
It'll get you tossed out of paradise and send you to the dentist.
And, of course, questionable parenting.
Yes. I think...
A lot of it.
of quite a bit. And I think every movie and television show Mike Flanagan makes is just one big questionable parenting movie that keeps doing over and over again.
If this is questionable parenting the podcast, he's always making questionable parenting the movie.
Yes. Which, I mean, we should have him on. He's from Salem. Maybe we could get him. I don't know.
Hey, neighbor.
But yeah, it's we can talk a little bit more about him and later, but this is very much a Mike Flanagan story, because having just watched Haunting of Bly Manor, there is a lot of stuff going on in this structurally and whatnot that is very similar to that.
Yeah.
And, Dr. Sleep is kind of similar. There's a lot of stuff going on that he likes to play with. But I said at the beginning that I kind of had reactions to the two sides of this movie, the beginning and the second half. And it really is this movie is a tale of two halves. But the thing that I can't figure out, and if you'd like to jump off from here, is this movie a slow burn, or is the first half just bad?
I think it's attempting to be a slow burn, but I kind of think the first half just is kind of bad. Which I hate even saying that, because I do really enjoy the second half. And I am a fan of Mike Flanagan in general. Like I like the themes he sort of tends to grapple with. I like that sort of perspective he brings to horror, and but I still just don't. I think the first half of this it feels so long at points.
It really does take it takes a while to really get going, and I'm not someone that needs it to be needs it to be a roller coaster right away, but there's something about the pacing of the first half of this that just doesn't click with me. And I think part of that is the long sequence kind of at the end of the first act, where Karen Gillan spends not a small amount of time recounting the backstory of this cursed mirror, and then that's followed up by sort of arguments with her brother about their family history at length, kind of. And I think it's just all of that stuff put together in the same, so concentrated in the same section of the movie that makes it feel like they're taking forever to get to the good stuff.
Yeah, and then when you add to that there was this sort of the beginning sequences, which I think for Tim, for the brother, it makes sense that you sort of see him getting discharged from the facility he's been living in, because it sets up sort of the central, like, wait a minute, how did this very normal seeming guy end up in this position? And then you hear him say, I think at one point to his therapist as he's getting discharged, well, I shot my father and blah, blah, blah. So I think that works because it sets things up pretty quickly and gives you something that you're curious about really fast. The parts that I think work less, kind of going along with what you were saying about the Karen Gillan's character direct to camera, just holding up black and white photos and discussing history. Before that, even, there's the scenes where she is with her fiance and they work at, like, what, Christie's or something?
Yeah, some
like,
auction house.
Yeah, and isn't she supposed to be like 23 and I don't know.
Yes, yeah, she's very young and has this, like, very high up position at an auction house, which apparently gives her free reign to just borrow the stuff that they have at auction, because it's the whole setup is that, first of all, there's this mirror that's from some royal estate or whatever that is also a mirror that her family got at, like, a yard sale 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And then after that, the mirror itself sells for like $16,000 or something, or is it more than? I think it might be more than that. I think it's a ridiculous amount of money, and she just borrows it. It's getting ready to be shipped to the person who bought it, and she's just like, you know what? I got a big trunk. I'll throw it in the back of my car. I'll drive it myself. It's like that kind of thing. It's very odd.
Well, yeah, and the whole sequence around, like, her watching the auction, and sort of watching that the bidding on the glass, and then her overseeing it getting, like, packed a certain way. It's just so it's kind of unnecessary to the movie in my opinion. I think it would have been more compelling had she just said to her brother, well, why don't you come meet me at the house? Like, we'll talk. And then he shows up and she's like, all right, you're here. Look what I got. Look what I have set up. Like, I think you could have done it more like that and then given them more time, because I also think part of what makes the first half feel so slow, even when you know what's coming in the second half, is that the second half is really good.
Yeah.
So it would be nice if maybe they at least started moving into that phase of the movie a little sooner, and they gave it a little more time and sort of maybe had a little more opportunity to play with things.
Yeah, I think it's hamstrung a little bit by the Autopsy of Jane Doe Memorial Expendable Character Award, which is her boyfriend or fiance, who is really only there to have someone to kill late in the third act,
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those weird sort of backtracking things where it's like, okay, well, we need someone we need to throw some gore and have a murder or something happen at this point in the story, but there's only really two people in the story. What if she's got a boyfriend? Okay, well, why would he be there? What if they work together at the auction house or something, and that's how she gets the mirror? Yeah, sure, sounds good. So you introduce him in the first 10 minutes, and then he doesn't come back until he gets a broken pottery sliced his neck open, which it's actually very similar. That character is almost identical to the Autopsy of Jane Doe character, who is there to have, like, one conversation with her about her state of mind and her family, and then he disappears and then shows up for literally maybe 5 seconds before he gets killed.
My one thing is, I will say, one reason why I actually like the inclusion of the fiance is then it sets up that great that she has him calling her cell phone every hour or every however long to check on her. And I think that's so great when she's killed him and then her phone rings and she picks it up and it's him on the other end being like, hey, how are you? You guys okay in there?
Yeah. That stuff is really good. The stuff that they set up as the way the mirror messes with you is very cool. Like creates this sort of like dream logic world where you can't trust what you're looking at. I guess unless you're looking through a camera, because at the end, towards the end, she starts looking at stuff through the phone on through the camera on her iPhone, and it's like she can see the reality through the phone, which is a little weird, but
yeah. And then the brother does the brother smash it, or somebody smashes the phone, right?
Yeah, there's a certain point where like even that is untrustworthy. Like that's the stuff that I think is great, because they do, once they really start ratcheting up the tension and hitting you with these really great gags, they kind of bring it to a point where you really have no idea what's really happening, what isn't, what's a memory, what's someone like reliving a past trauma. And you're kind of all over. I said a roller coaster ride. It's kind of, that's how you are. Like you're not really sure what's up and what's down, and then they kind of hit you with the end there that I think works pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. I especially like the moments where one of the characters, either has been in the room with or realizes they're in the room with their sibling, and they turn and it's like the little kid version.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I like those transitions where it's like adult Tim turns and it's like, 10-year-old Kaylie behind him instead of 23-year-old.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That stuff is great because it's again, that's something that he's done in other stuff. He does that kind of stuff in Bly Manor quite a bit, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it works very well. How do you feel about the backstory on the mirror? Because Karen Gillan goes into this whole thing where she starts. This mirror apparently was important enough that there is a documented history of it and the things that happened around it for the past 300 years, but it is not so important that this family couldn't have bought it at like a swap meet or something
in the like 1990s.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because the mirror. So the mirror, again, I keep thinking of The Autopsy of Jane Doe, where
they're very similar, actually.
They are, especially like the more you think about it, the more similar they are. Where like the Jane Doe's body has become a vessel for this like malevolent force, the same way this mirror is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they're functioning out of the same need. But I think they get the same result in that they kill whoever comes in contact with it and just migrate on to the next people.
Right. Well, what's interesting about that, not to kind of sideswipe a little bit, but I very clearly in my head remembered a scene in this movie that does not exist. And that scene is at the end of the movie. I could have sworn there was a scene where you see the mirror getting dropped off at the next person's house, which seems like a no-brainer, right? Because the whole thing is about how this mirror has gone place to place to place, and how it's caused damage and killed people and whatnot. And then at the end of the movie, the mirror wins, and then it's on to Chicago, But but they don't do that, and I was very surprised by that because of the Jane Doe parallel was in my head, where it's like, well, yeah, it's the same kind of conceit where they find her buried in a place where damage has been done. She gets moved to the next place, damage is done there, and then they move her on to the next place afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that they didn't go that route. I wonder if it was partially to like let that end shot be of Tim getting dragged out of the house again. Because that kind of more emphasizes the cyclical nature of like the family trauma that's going on rather than focusing on the mirror itself. Because as much as the mirror takes an active part in and is very important in this movie, it's not the focus. It's not like in Jane Doe, her body is so central to like every shot, every piece of action, almost every scene. Really, like, her physical presence is so important to it.
Right.
There are whole sections of Oculus, even the section in the second half when they're in the house, there are whole scenes where the mirror's completely out of view, and you almost sort of forget that the mirror is the, like, instigating object or force in the story. It's like the story is already, it's kind of it's running on its own based off of the human characters rather than the evil object. Like, it's almost, the mirror becomes almost secondary to the story that's being told.
Right. And, you know, that is something that I think Mike Flanagan does really well, for better or worse. Because, this, like I said, this is very much one of his movies. It's got a lot of the hallmarks of his stuff, like multi-generational family demons, time jumps, and most importantly, literal and figurative ghosts. That's the thing that he does really well, I think, for better or worse, where whatever the horror element is usually a, if not an active metaphor, it is kind of just the vessel for these other more metaphorical demons and ghosts, what have you, that the characters are dealing with.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Because it gives it, I mean, ideally, you want to have something like that baked into any horror movie you're doing, because it automatically makes the stuff you're doing that much heavier, you know?
Yeah, it adds stakes.
Right,
like,
right.
And like an emotional foundation to things that makes it easier to become invested in the characters and what they're going through than, say, in a movie like, Friday the 13th, where you might like a lot of those teens who are coming to work at the camp, but you don't really know anything about their, like, emotional inner lives, the things that they've had to go through. Like, so when they die, it has less of an impact. Unless
you get my favorite kind of scene where they just kind of sit around and talk to each other about what their literal and figurative ghosts actually are.
Which happens a lot at points in this movie.
Yeah, that stuff. Well, I think it's different, because that stuff tends to drive me nuts. But in a movie like Friday the 13th, you're just doing that to try and, like, a last gasp give some character to these people before they get killed. Yeah. Whereas in a movie like this, it is kind of the point. Like, they are dealing with this family trauma of her father or their father torturing and I think killing their mother, and then ultimately the brother shoots the father and kills him. But there's this mirror element involved where she is smart enough to not really talk about it, but the brother apparently, I don't know if it was part of why he got committed or if it was just because of the killing of his father. But this mirror is the spotlight of negative energy that is kind of making all this stuff happen. So in that case, talking about these old family ghosts and stuff and family problems makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like there's a way that they do it a few times that I actually really like, which is one of the siblings will tell a story or I should say, like, recount an event in their childhood, and the other one will be like, "What are you talking about? That's not how it happened."
Yes, I like that a lot too, yeah.
Yeah, and then it shows you, like, the slightly different version of the memory. Like, there's Kaylie's versions of the memories where it is this, like, eerie, evil mirror, slow descent into madness thing. And then there's Tim's version of a bunch of the memories, and it's just like, no, yeah, Dad was having an affair.
Right.
Like, very bad, but mundane bad.
Right. Which I think is is an interesting way to play it, because then you can bring in, obviously this thing has a literal history of demonic possession and deeds attached to it, but you can bring that element of, is the mirror really a monster mirror that's causing this to happen, or is that just projection from the kids to explain away the misdeeds of their parents that they can't understand at that age?
Yeah, they do. I think they kind of gesture at that concept, that like introducing that question of whether or not the mirror is actually literal evil. Especially when I think Tim says to Kaylie, how many files or news articles or cases did you have to look through to find those 10?
Yeah.
So he's like kind of implying that it could just be, if this item has been around and moved from person to person and place to place for 300 years, of course there's going to be some tragedy and trauma and death around it.
Yeah.
That's just inevitable over time.
I do also really appreciate that they don't play it like a mystery, because when Wes, the Star Trek episodes Wes and I have been doing lately have been a lot of storytelling shortcuts by just making something a mystery and withholding information and hoping that people care about what the answer is. And I think this could very easily have fallen into that trap with all these flashbacks, because once you start doing flashbacks, unless you're really careful with them, it can turn into, okay, what's the punchline of this flashback going to be? This doesn't have that, because going in what happened. You know that there was, more or less, you know that the mirror is a demon mirror and it used to be in their house and something awful happened. So it's not a mystery as to, it's not this big reveal that who gets killed or whatever. You know kind of what's going to happen, just not exactly how it's going to happen. So it then becomes interesting. What's generating your interest is how it happens, how these things manifest, how they start breaking down and whatnot. And I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because the more we talk about this and the more I think about it in the context of stuff that I've been looking at in school, it's sort of like, this is a really interesting exercise. It's almost like a postmodernist take on like time, because it has this really interesting non-linear time element about it, where you start with the like given stated facts of what happened, and then you work backwards from there almost, but not exactly backwards. It's all sort of like cyclical and sort of swirled together, where you're moving from one piece of the memory to the next almost in terms of association more than in terms of like a linear time frame moving forward.
Right. It's like something will trigger a certain memory that isn't tied to where you are narratively in the film. It's just
right.
Yeah. I like that. And I really appreciate that they kind of invert the characters a bit, where I feel like traditionally the brother, who has been in a mental institute since the incident where the parents were killed, would be the one who comes out of the mental institute and is like, okay, now I'm out. I can finally get revenge on this monster that no one has believed existed, which is why they put me in this mental institute. And then his sister would be like, but that doesn't exist. You need to, it was all dad. Dad killed mom or whatever. They flip that.
Yeah.
They flip that and have the supernatural stuff having been therapied out of him. So he comes out of the mental institute with all of these signposts, or not signposts, but therapy-related things to grab onto to explain what happened. Whereas the sister is kind of crazy, because she's been spending 20 years or 15 years or however researching this thing, probably specifically getting her job at the auction house just in case. I think she says that, right? Sort of like she's working at the auction house. She finally managed to get the piece come through.
I wouldn't be surprised if she got her fiance just in case.
Right, yeah. Like she's the one who is all in on the craziness of this mirror. And when they start doing their whatever, the brother is the one who's trying to reason with her. He's being the rational one, instead of the person from the mental institute is the rational one instead of the person who's been living outside, which is a nice flip.
Yeah, it definitely is, and even the gender aspects of it too. Like, you know, she's not just like, oh, I'm really worried about you, and this isn't healthy, and you know, you just got out. Maybe you just need to, you know, calm down. Like, there's none of that. Mm-hmm. She's like, kind of almost harsh in her beliefs. Like, she's not gonna back down. She is like moving forward regardless of what he has to say.
Yeah, she has no regard for the fact that he just got out of a mental institute. Like,
she's like mildly a psychopath.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. She's nuts. And like as soon as she finds out he got out, she calls him and she's like, I need you to come to the house. I found the mirror. We have to destroy it. We were talking a little bit about the backstory of the mirror and all these stories they tell and whatnot. Would you have preferred it? Because like I like that stuff, and I like it in concept. I like the idea of it. And in the trivia for this on IMDb, it was said that Stephen King loved this movie, and I 100% understand why. Because Mike Flanagan and Stephen King are definitely interested in the same stuff thematically. Where it's, you know, the monsters are generally, the monster isn't the monster, it's usually the people that are the monster, and the monster is just sort of like an accent for the stuff that the people are doing. And also those stories about the history of the mirror, I 100% could see those being dedicated chapters in the Stephen King 500-page version of Oculus.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it would be like, God, I wish I could remember if in the book The Shining, if you get more of the backstory to all the ghosts in the hotel. Yeah,
I don't remember either. The one that I was thinking of was It, because It has a lot of those.
Read that one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, It has a lot of those side stories in it where it will just kind of have a non sequitur, for the lack of a better term, about something that happened in the history of the town involving Pennywise. Like we mentioned it in the show. That's the scene. It begins the second chapter of It, the movie, where the gay couple gets assaulted and murdered, I guess.
Yeah, the hate crime.
Yes, yeah. Like that's kind of just a segmented story or a separated story in the book, just to kind of give this, flesh out this history of what Pennywise has been doing and how it's been manifesting and stuff. And I 100% see those stories as something like that, where, you know, if this was a book, you'd do a few chapters talking about them, and then the next chapter is about 18th century Stanley Tucci, and then you come back to the present. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I typically like that kind of stuff too. I just feel like in this movie, where that first half is so slow, mm-hmm. and then she goes through so many of these, and it really is just her talking into a camera on a tripod and then occasionally bickering with her brother, and there's really not a whole hell of a lot else going on when she does them. I wonder if, like, do you think they would have been, I don't know, like maybe if they had shown some as like flashbacks, like.
Well, I was wondering, you know, I think it fleshes it out nicely to have that stuff in there, but I honestly don't know if you need it at all. Other than, I can't remember if I've mentioned this already. It may have been the last time we tried to do this, but there's, I recently have been thinking a lot about something I read about Clint Eastwood taking 2 pages of dialogue from, or expository backstory dialogue from the script of, you know, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or one of those Sergio Leone Westerns,
Yeah.
And condensing it down. It was supposed to be this exposition about why he does what he does, why he decided to get involved with this story or whatever, this long-winded explanation. And he condensed it down to because once there was a family and nobody came. And it's like, it's just such a beautiful summation in 2 lines that gets you where you need to go. And I wonder if that's the kind of thing here where it's like I feel like you could allude to this stuff and make reference to it, but I don't know if you need to spend as much time going through the stories. I guess it's really a matter of taste.
Yeah, I think maybe if the beginning section had been structured otherwise, like if some aspect of it had been structured differently, you could have probably worked a couple in there and had it still work, but just the pacing feels so off in that first half. So like when you were reading the background information on this, it was interesting to me when you said it was originally based on a short film.
Yes, yeah.
As soon as I heard that, I was like, I get it now. Mm-hmm. Like they took something that had been written to be this probably very like tight, condensed story, and then to make it into a feature-length movie, you had to add to it somehow. Yeah,
which is funny because that's one of the things I said about Jane Doe is where I thought it felt like it was a short film that they expanded out, even though it wasn't, because it had that same kind of feeling where it's like they've got the core idea, which is really solid and can probably get you like 45 minutes to an hour, but then you got to get that other 40 minutes or so. And so you just kind of got to start throwing stuff at the wall and see what works to figure out how to extend it out.
Was A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night also initially a short?
I think so. I'm not 100%
I feel like something we've done definitely was, and I can't quite pin it down. I think it might have been that one, but yeah. I could be wrong.
But the short film is on YouTube. I didn't get a chance to watch it. I kind of wish that I had, but I'm not the best host here. But
are you not the what's the Batman quote? He's not the hero we deserve. He's the hero we need.
Yes, that's it. That's me. Living long enough to see myself become the villain. But yeah, it's. Do you think? I think it's kind of interesting to me, actually, because I don't know where the line would be for this. If you said, "Oh, this was based on a short film," I don't know if that would be my first thought, because like I was saying with Jane Doe, generally there's that kind of feeling where it's like, okay, I can see what the core of this was and I can see where they stretched it out. But the core of Oculus, the stuff that, if you want to call the second half of it the stuff where they stretch it out, I think that stuff just works better. So it's tough to find that line.
Oh, see, I was thinking that the sort of added material was the beginning, the first half.
Well, what I do know about the short film is it looks like it takes place in one room, and it's like a guy talking to a camera, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Didn't you, when we watched this, didn't you joke that it was based on a stage production, a play? And we all were like, wait, really? And you were like, no, not at all.
Well, I jokingly said that because the first half really feels like a play almost, because it's so talky, and they are really getting into these sort of like dramatic scenes where it's two people at a table talking about their family history that we don't have any frame of reference for, and you got to try to. They're doing all this exposition, and the emotions are heating up, and it's not super visual at that point. It's very talky.
Yeah. No, it definitely is, but this movie is like, I can't tell if the story is just becomes secondary in my mind to some of the sort of horror gags that come later, or the style. Like, I can't tell if I enjoy it because of the story or if I just enjoy it purely because of the style in the second half.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, as we were talking, I was kind of scrubbing through the short film. And it is very much the scene with Karen Gillan talking about the history of the mirror. That is, it seems to be most of the movie, most of the short.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's basically her whole plan about isolating it and trying to record everything. That's essentially the core of what the short film is, it seems. So it's funny that they do all of that in the span of like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is really interesting, like you're saying, because the second half almost feels like the style is very different from the first half. And I think the gags work really good. Like the sort of line for me where it starts to get into the good stuff is the light bulb, where she bites into the light bulb thinking it's an apple, which is a fantastic gag, which they really let you sit in that one. Where she's like pulling pieces of glass out of her mouth. It's great.
Yeah, and that's so well shot too, because like you see it you see it happening. You see it like her putting the light bulb down next to the apple she was just eating. Mm-hmm. Like just the way it's put together and framed and everything is really well done as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fingernail thing is great.
Oh, no. I can't. I am not super squeamish, but the fingernail stuff, it really, like, it just gets to me. I don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff doesn't really bother me that much. I get more of a kick out of it seeing how much it bothers other people.
Oh, I do remember you saying that.
Yeah, like I know the one that people talk about a lot is the hangnail in Black Swan, where she picks the hangnail and it just goes all the way down her finger.
Ah.
When I saw that in the theater, the reaction from the audience was just was great. It's I just have a lot of respect for being able to do something so simple and get such a response out of people.
Well, yeah, because I think it's a very like a visceral thing because you can imagine it happening to you.
Yeah.
Like for instance, some people cut their fingers very badly while chopping vegetables in their kitchens.
I have done this, yes.
Yeah, but so it's like you can make it really visually jarring, mm-hmm. but it's also very like an understandable hurt. Whereas watching somebody get like their arm cut off, you're just like, arm got cut off. But like watching somebody like their fingernail, it's just like, oh God, like you can imagine it happening to you.
Yeah, and stuff like that. Those more relatable, smaller things do get really like if you ever see somebody get like a nasty paper cut in a movie, you go, ugh. Yeah. Paper cuts are awful to begin with.
Yeah.
And anytime that they weaponize them in a movie, it's that much worse. But yeah, like the way that they do it, where he's got the bandage around the Band-Aid on his finger, and he's like trying to pull at the Band-Aid, and then they do the hard cut to him actually pulling the fingernail off of his finger. Excellent.
I looked away. I couldn't do it.
And just to make you feel even more squeamish, when I did cut my finger while I was cutting vegetables, I don't have very much memory of what it felt like. I have a very sharp, clear memory of what it sounded like. Because I cut through my thumbnail. And the sound that it made will never leave my ears as long as I live.
Stop it. Oh my God, no. Oh God, this is like an audio horror right now.
Yeah.
For me. Oh God.
Yep.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem.
I won't be having nightmares about that tonight or anything.
Yeah, what other gags did you like in this? I really liked the one where the mom, what was it? The mom was in the study, or she thought somebody was in the study, but there was nobody in there, and a dog. There was a dog in the study, right? that she thought was barking all day. Like that those little things that they were doing to imply that the mother was maybe just going crazy. I thought was really good.
I liked when the siblings, the adult siblings, have been arguing, and then they come back into the study where the mirror's hanging, and all of the camera equipment has been turned around to point at itself.
Yeah.
And everything is like weird, and then they roll back the tape, and they see themselves doing it while they're still having, like, while they have the argument they thought they were having, like, out in the hall or something.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah. That one's very good. I thought I really liked the ending. The way the mirror manages to get the upper hand on it, because there's a certain point. I feel like there's a certain point where you can see the kids lose control of the battle because it stops becoming about destroying the mirror, and it becomes more about them sort of facing the elements that happened when they were kids. And so you get that moment where Karen Gillan, as a child, sees the mother in the mirror, and so she goes to hug the mom. And because they've established this thing that you're not seeing necessarily what everybody else is seeing, the brother doesn't see this happen, so he has the wherewithal to go and hit the kill switch that'll cause the thing to hit the mirror, but he doesn't see that his sister's there, and so it kills his sister. It's just really well done.
Yeah, it is a little bit like this mousetrap has been set.
Yeah.
And you're just waiting the whole time they get in the house. You know that big anchor or whatever she has suspended over it. Like, you know it's going to come down. You just don't know what it's going to hit when it does.
Right. Yes.
And so you spend the whole second half of the movie with that kind of in the back of your head as everything else is happening. Yeah, I think the ending is great, and the way it's set up where there are, like, everybody is living, they're living in their own realities, and the mirror has successfully, like, diverted them and distracted them so well into kind of fighting themselves and fighting each other rather than paying attention to, like, the real problem in the room.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty slick story once it gets going. How do you feel about it as a whole, though? We kind of separated into these two pieces where it's like, yeah, it's kind of slow at the beginning, but then it gets pretty good. How do you feel as a whole piece?
I think overall I still like it. I think it does enough interesting stuff on both sides to merit being on this list and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like, especially.
Okay. That's interesting.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll get into that in a minute.
Oh, okay. Well, because I think it subverts a few tropes really interestingly. I think it works in the end. I would change some stuff in that first half, but I think as a whole, it's a pretty successful horror movie.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's much like Autopsy of Jane Doe. I do think it sits in that sort of, I don't know if I would call this one a cult movie, because I don't really hear a lot of people talk about it as much as I do Autopsy of Jane Doe, but I think it kind of falls into that same basket, where if you put it on not expecting much, I think you will be pleasantly surprised by it, unless the first half, you don't get through the first half.
Yeah. I think it's interesting in terms of where Mike Flanagan has sort of in the last couple years made such a stronger name for himself and made a little bit more of a mark with the last few things that he's come out with. I think it's really interesting to watch this movie if you like his other stuff, because you can sort of see it's similar to oh my god, The Innkeepers and House of the Devil. Yeah, it's kind of similar to that, where you can see him like chewing on those themes that are like the big preoccupying themes for him.
Right.
And this is sort of like, I don't know if this is where he starts with it, but it's definitely like an interesting early example of him working on those themes compared to like, you know, Hill House or Bly Manor or even Dr. Sleep.
Right.
It's like kind of intriguing to put them all together.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point to talk about the where it sits on the list and whether or not it deserves to be there, because as we've talked about, this seems to be a very modern and populist leaning list, where the newer stuff that has higher ratings tends to end up there very high on the list. And I was looking through it because I was like, Oculus, you know, if I was thinking of 200 great horror movies, I don't know if if that's one I would pick. This list has all of Mike Flanagan's movies but one.
Oh,
and
wow.
I have to imagine, not that I don't think that they're bad. I mean, not that I think they're bad. I have to imagine that has to have something to do with the fact that he's just hot right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't argue that. That's probably correct.
Like it has I'm sorry, it's missing two of them. But like one of the other ones on there is Ouija, Origin of Evil, which is a sequel to a movie based on the concept of just the Ouija board, which I don't think was any good. The first one was very good, but the second one has an 82% Rotten Tomatoes score, which makes me really interested to watch it.
Huh.
Because I'm really curious to see, is this legitimately just like a sleeper good movie that happens to be the sequel to a movie based on the Ouija board concept? You know, as trademarked by Parker Brothers or whoever owns it. Or is it just on there because it's like it has a Mike Flanagan bump because he is so popular at the moment?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I will be curious if by the time we get around to it, if it's even still on the list.
It's been there since day one. It's kind of, it's in, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's going to get completely bumped because it's actually higher than this movie. Oculus is 182. Ouija Origin of Evil is 159.
Now I'm just confused.
Yeah. So jumping back, how do you feel about the placement on the list of Oculus? Too low, too high? Does it deserve to be here?
I mean, I still stand by the statement that I think it, considering the other movies on the list, there are other movies I would bump off probably before I bumped this one.
Sure.
I know that's not exactly like a ringing endorsement. But I think it does, it captures a couple like classic horror movie tropes, and then also sort of adds that, like, you know, the way he does gimmicks, like the gags and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if for nothing else, then I think the child actors in this are great.
Yeah, they are. They're very good. Yes,
they're very good.
Yeah, at 182, this placement actually, if you're gonna put this on the list, 182 isn't a bad place to put it, because it's close enough to the bottom where I can kind of go, yeah, all right, that's fine.
Yeah.
And looking at the movies that it's ahead of, I have a couple problems, but it's not quite as egregious as some of the other ones have been.
Like The Shining.
Yeah, yes. It is right in front of Candyman, so I guess 182, 183 is just where all the mirror-based horror movies get set. Oh. And like if you called Candyman through the Oculus, would that like be like crossing the streams and Ghostbusters and everything would just explode? Or would you summon like Super Candyman because you summoned him through a demon mirror?
Or would they cancel each other out and both explode or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe calling Candyman through the demon mirror actually just takes away both their power, and you just get a nice mirror and like some friendly bees.
I mean, bees are very important to the environment, Clay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, if it's going to be on the list, I think 182 is a fine place to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple glaring ones that I don't think I would put it in front of, but overall I think it's a fine placement.
Yeah, I agree. I think this movie is kind of, it's interesting because it has so many great moments and visual scenes, but there's so much of it that I think we're both kind of lukewarm about, that we just get this sort of like, meh.
Would you recommend it? If someone said, I'm looking for a horror movie to watch, give me something outside the box, would it be on the list of things that you said, why don't you give Oculus a shot?
Probably not, unless I knew the person like enjoyed other Mike Flanagan stuff, or kind of like, I love Karen Gillan, she's the best.
Sure.
Like, if I had like a very specific reason to recommend it, I would. I wouldn't tell people to stay away from it.
Yeah.
I think I would just have to forewarn people that like, you're going to have to sit through like 40 minutes that you might find really boring.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones where you're like, it's pretty good. I just got to tell you, just stick with it. Just stick with it. And it's because you're probably going to get texts from them being like, this movie, what's going on? This is kind of boring. And then you got to be like, just stick with it. When she eats the apple, everything after that's great. But
yeah, it's tough to recommend a movie like that. It's not one that you would pass along in an effort to impress anybody.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think unless you had anything else you wanted to touch on, I think that's going to do it for Oculus.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen everything I need to see.
So for next time, we actually we're coming up on a multiple of 5. So we were supposed to do a wild card, which I have already picked out. We're going to do 1989 Society. However,
oh boy.
However, I looked at the calendar and realized that would be dropping on December 23rd, and Society is not really a Christmas movie. So why don't we take an opportunity to do a Christmas movie? So we're going to mix it up a little bit. Instead of me coming up with a Christmas movie that's not on the list, we're going to do number 199, which is 1974's Black Christmas.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which I'm very excited about because you have not seen that, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm very excited because I have not seen it, and you and others have told me that I need to watch this one. So
yes.
I'm pumped for this one.
It is the Godfather of the slasher movie, and oddly enough, it is directed by Bob Clark, the guy who directed A Christmas Story. So he's got a bit of a bookend there.
I mean, the man's got one theme, and he's just trying variations on it.
Yeah, and one of them was, well, I guess they were both successful. We'll talk about that when we get to it. Anyway, that's going to do it for us on Rotten Horror Picture Show. Thank you for joining us. If you like what you heard, give us a rating or review in iTunes. That would be great. Thank you, Amanda, for joining me.
Thank you, Clay.
We will see you next time for Black Christmas.
Bye, everybody.